Good morning, Morai V'Rabotai, Baruchim Habayim. We're continuing on Masechet Succah, and today's Amud is Daf Hey, Amud Bet. We're holding 15 lines down from the top of the Amud, Umimai de Chalala. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Rufuah Shelema for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, that should have full recovery, Rufuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Also dedicated to Rufuah Shelema of Yosef ben Shalom Shaharam, should have Rufuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Also for the girl in our community that has had the incident that everyone is aware of, should have Rufuah Shelema Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, in Mirz Hashem, full recovery. Amen. This month's Amud Yomi has been dedicated for the Zchut, as Zchut for the families, Shea family, Cohen family, and Dayan families. Should be an ultimate Zchut for all their mishpachot, Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Okay, so we learned the tall sukkah that is pasul from three different mekorot in the Gemara, and then the Gemara said, explaining the Mishnah that is sukkah that is more shallow, lower than 10 tefachim, also is pasul, right? And Mara said, where do we know it from? Mara said, we know it from the Mishkan, because the Shekhinah of Hashem, which would speak, and the presence that would be there above the kaporet was 10 tefachim high, and the Shekhinah was on top of that, and therefore you learn sukkah that should be 10 tefachim as well. How do we know that? Because the pasuk says that the dimensions of the Aron, of the Ark of the Covenant, was 2.5 amot by 1.5 high, and 1.5 high we mentioned is 9 tefachim. How do we know that? Because we assumed, and we'll see that that's going to be challenged in just a moment, we assume that every amma is 6 tefachim. So of course, amma and half would be 9 tefachim. And we learned that the kaporet that was sitting on top of that was a tefach as well. We learned that penei el penei kaporet, right, and penei keruvim. So we learned that it is a tefach. So 9 plus 1 is 10, and then the Gemara is going to challenge it in just one moment. We literally had an amud of half of back and forth to learn this, and the Gemara is going to throw it out in just one short sentence. So says the Gemara, the bomb kasha, umimai de chalala asara bar mischacha. How do you know that the inside cavity of the open area of the sukkah has to be 10 tefachim? You are learning it from the Aron and the Kaporet, after all. And the Aron and Kaporet together are 10 tefachim. So maybe, just like the box and the lid are 10 tefachim, the sukkah and the schach should be 10 tefachim, which will make the area inside the sukkah, of course, more shallow than 10 tefachim. But you just told me that the area inside has to be 10 tefachim high. Remember, we said if the leaves are coming inside the 10, it's pasul, because it's diras rucha. So therefore, the whole learning that you have is only good enough if you want to tell me that the sukkah and its schach together has to be 10 tefachim. So says the Gemara, Ema behades chacha, maybe together with the schach should be 10. Ela mibet olamim gamarla. The Gemara throws out the entire learning that we have had so far, so you can't learn from it. A different makor is needed, and we learn it from the Bet HaMikdash. So far, we were learning it from the Mishkan. Now we're going to be learning it from the Bet HaMikdash. Now, I'm sorry to break this to you, but contrary to the popular understanding, the Mishkan and the Bet HaMikdash were not the same size at all. And the Bayit Rishon and Bayit Sheni were not the same size at all. And the Bayit Sheni and Bayit Shlishi will not be the same size at all. Every one of them is completely different. Of course, the Parashiot Trumat Saveh and Vayakel Pekudeh they talk about the dimensions of all the vessels and the Mishkan. That's where you go to understand how the Mishkan looked like. If you want to understand how the Bayit Rishon of Shlomo Melech looked like, you go to Melachim, Perek Aleph, Hey Vav, and Zayin, and Chet. That's where the whole story is said from the beginning to the end. And if you want to learn Bayit Sheni, you have to go to Chagai and the Nevuot that are there, and Bayit Shlishi will be in Yechezkel, right? Every one of them is different, and as the Gemara says later on in Masechet Succah, right? Hakol bichtav, everything, every detail of each one of them was dictated by a clear nevuah how it has to be. Right? By the way, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein learns from here that the mechitza in a shul is the oraita, not just the rabbanan. It's not just a nice thing to do. He understands that it's an absolute isur deoraita to have or to daven in a shul that doesn't have a proper mechitza, because hakol bichtav. The Gemara learns later on in our Masechet in Daf Nun Bet how they in Simchat B'Tashoeva in Chol HaMoed every night they had a massive party, simcha, and men, women, children, everyone came to see. It was so much light there that in entire Yerushalayim you could go to your backyard and check beans and so on. And it was a tremendous thing. And women came. So how do you, and the Gemara says they made a structure for the woman to be on top. It was a mechitza and a balcony and a mechitza on top of it. And says Rav Moshe Feinstein, well, how can you do that? You can't just build this structure unless you are addressing a Isur D'Oraita. That becomes a whole discussion by itself. It's in Igrot Moshe, in Chelik Aleph Avur HaChaim, in Siman Lametet mainly, and then afterwards Mem Aleph. But nevertheless, over here, we are discussing the first Beit HaMikdash that was built by Shlomo Melech, which is much larger than the Mishkan. But you have to understand, as the Gemara is going to say, that all the ratios were kept exactly the same. So if something was 1/3 of something, that was the same in the Mishkan and in the Mikdash, and therefore, at least by Mikdash Shlomo Melech, and that is something we're going to use to understand the measurements for Sukkah in just a moment. So says the Gemara, take a look at the Beit HaMikdash Bayit Rishon that was built by Shlomo Melech. Tichtiv, that the pasuk says about it, Vehabayit asher bana Melech Shlomo, the house, the Beit HaMikdash that Shlomo Melech built. Again, this is in Melachim Aleph Perek Vav. When Shlomo Melech, again, this is a 12-year-old king that took over and immediately started building, and he built this magnificent structure in 4 years, a very short time for building such amazing edifice. And says the pasuk, Habayit asher bana Melech Shlomo laHashem. You know how the sizes were? Shishim ama orko, it was 60 amot long, ve'esrim rochvo, and 20 amot wide, ushloshim ama komato, and 30 amot tall. Right? So this was like 3 times almost certainly the height was 3 times, the length was 3 times. It's a massive structure. So it says the Gemara, uchtiv komata keruv ha'echad. Now, another thing that people, contrary to, again, the common understanding, they say if you went to the Kodesh HaKodashim, how many keruvim did you see there? Of Shlomo Melech's Beit HaMikdash? So everyone thinks you had 2 keruvim on top of the Aron, right? That's how it is. Wrong. Shlomo Melech built 2 ginormous keruvim standing on the floor of the Kodesh HaKodashim, and with their wings open, so chachim bekanfehem, so to speak, on the entire area of Kodesh HaKodashim, their wings touching each other from the 2 sides of the Kodesh HaKodashim. Then you entered, and these were 10 amot tall. They were massive, right? So says the pasuk, Komata keruva echad eser ba'ama. The height of each one of these keruvim was eser amot. Right? This is 15 feet tall structures of keruvim from the two sides. This is you're talking about gold structures that Shlomo Melech built. V'chen hakeruv hashani, and same was corresponding to the second side, a symmetric second keruv to the first one. V'tanya, and we learned in the Braita, ma matzinu bebet olamim keruvim b'shlish habayit, just like in Bet Olamim, which is a kinui, a nickname for Bet HaMikdash, Bet Olamim, that the keruv that Shlomo Melech made was standing 1/3 tall of the entire height of the Kodesh HaKodashim, which was 30 amot. It was 30 amot. So those 10, which is 1/3, same exact ratio applied also to the Mishkan. Mishkan nami kruvim b'shlish habayit hen omdim. They also were standing 1/3 tall to the entire height of the Mishkan. Now, what was the height of the Mishkan? We know the orach hakrashim, the length of every beam, every pillar of the Mishkan was 10 amot. Right? So let's do some math over here. So Mishkan kama hayu 10 amot. Mishkan was 10 amot tall. Dichtiv, as the pasuk says in the Chumash, 10 amot orech hakeresh ha'echad. Each one of the krashim, each one of the beams, the pillars, the poles of the Mishkan was 10 amot tall. So kama avulehu. So how much is? Let's translate this to tfachim because it makes it easier. So how much is 10 amot? 60, right? We just spoke about this yesterday or the last year, that every amat binyan is 6 tfachim. So 10 times 6 is 60. So shitin pushchi. Pushchi is another word for tefach, is Aramaic word for tefach. So shitin pushchi. So telate kamave, 1/3 of it would be 20 tfachim, right? 20 tfachim is the height of the aron plus the kruvim on top. How much is that? 1/3 of the entire thing. Dal asara. So we said before, we spent a lot of time on this. How tall was the aron plus the kaporet? 10. So how much does that leave you with for the structure of the kruvim? Right? 20 minus 10 is 10. So the keruv itself was 10 tfachim tall. That makes the aron, which is 10, together with the kruvim on top of the kaporet, 10. The whole thing is 20 tfachim, which is 1/3 of the entire space in Kodesh HaKodashim. So says the Gemara, Pashu lehu asara uchtiv, and it says about the kruvim, vehayu hakruvim porsei kenafayim lemala, and these keruvim were porsei kenafayim lemala. Now we know the height of the keruv from its feet to head to toe is 10 tfachim, right? And the pasuk says their wings were sochechim, right? They were covering, which is the lashon of schach. You can't get better than this, right? Mamash schach. They were creating a schach with their wings above the area below their wings, which is on top of the kaporet, lemala, above, with their wings. Al hakaporet, above, over the area of kaporet. So says the Gemara, this is gold mine, because Imamash says schach and is above 10 amot. Awesome. So karierachman aschacha, the Torah is calling this eschach. So you want to know what's the minimum of schach? 10 tfachim. So says the Gemara, and it has to be lemala ma'asara. Well, says, wait a second. Omimayde gad faihu ilu yerashaihu kaimi. How do you know that their wings, they're holding above their head? We know from toe to head to toe was 10 tfachim. In order to say this, you have to say that when they were holding their wings was slightly above their head, so the area beneath is 10. But if they're holding like this, meaning it's rulered basically together with their head, so you have to still consider the thickness of their wings, which you will have the same exact problem as we just had a moment ago with the kaporet above the aron. Doesn't help anything. In order for this to be helpful, you need to know that the wings were slightly over the head, because we know head to toe is 10, and if the wings are exactly above that, then you know that the area inside the schach, inside the sukkah, has to be 10. Right? So how do you know that it was above? Mar says that's pashut, because it says lemala. They were creating a schach lemala, above. And above is coming to tell you that it was above their head. So beneath their wings was the minimum of 10 tfachim. Right, so says Gemara. Dilma, lehadera shaihu kaimi. Maybe it was even with their head level, and therefore we can't learn. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, the pasuk already has addressed this by saying lemala. Lemala ktiv. It says lemala. It was above the head. So Gemara asks the obvious question. It says, if it's lemala, how do you know how much lemala it is? Maybe it's a whole tefach lemala, and hence the area of sukkah has to be 11 tfachim, maybe 12 tfachim. How do you know it's exactly 10 and nothing above 10? So Gemara says, "Ve'ema de mitli tuva." Maybe it is way above. Maybe it is more than 10 tefachim subtotal. The Gemara says, "Wait a second. You can't learn that. Miktiv lemala lemala. Does it say lemala lemala? It says lemala. Lemala means the minimum lemala that you could have, because all of this the languages of Torah works like this. If it doesn't tell you, indicating something that is higher, you get the minimum chidush. The minimum chidush is it's exactly above 10, and the area beneath it is exactly 10. Fine. So that's awesome, and the Gemara is going to stick with this. So now we know, if someone asks you, how do you know that the minimum amount of sukkah is 10 tefachim? You say, well, we learn it from not the aron, not the kaporet, but the kruvim of the mishkan. The kruvim of the mishkan were 10 tefachim high space beneath their wings, and if they ask you how do you know that, then you'll give them the whole runaround of go to Melachim Aleph, Perek Vav, and come back to Sefer Shemot, and then you'll understand how it was. So now we know. Now, just as when you think everything is great, the Gemara has to remind you that everything is not so great, because that only works according to one of the Tanaim, and that's Rabbi Meir. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, this doesn't work at all. I mean, at all. Says the Gemara, Hanicha Rabbi Meir. This is a Gemara, by the way, Machloket Tanaim, in Masechet Menachot, Daf Tzadi Zayin. So let me explain it outside, and then we'll go inside. We just assumed, for a fact, that every Amah that the Mishkan talks about, the Chumash talks about, is 6 tfachim. Not simple at all. Without getting into too many details of 5, 6, and 7, the Amah Benonit is 6. The Amah Benonit, the medium Amah, is considered, the medium Amah is 6 tfachim. But there is a Machloket Tanaim, a famous Machloket Tanaim in Masechet Menachot that we just mentioned, Tzadi Zayin, between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, when we talk about the Mishkan and the Mikdash, how were the measurements made as far as the building measurements and as far as the vessel measurements. Rabbi Meir says it's easy, simple. Across the board, the building, the vessels, everything was 6 tfachim. Every time he says, Amma, 6 tfachim. You replace it, you're good to go, have a nice day. Rabbi Yehuda says no. I agree with you that by Amat HaBinyan, when we speak about measurements of the actual structure, the building, it's 6. That's Amma Benonit. But when we speak about the vessels, the kelim of the Mishkan or the Mikdash, it's not an Amma Benoni. It's a smaller Amma, which every Amma is only 5 tfachim. Now, if you say that, then we have a massive problem over here, right? And everyone's faces tell me that they already understand, but for myself, I'm going to review this, why it's a problem, because we said the Aron is how tall? 1.5 amot. And we just said 9, Hazak Baruch with 1 is going to be 10, and have a nice, right? That's how we said it. But that's only if you say 6 times 1.5, which will give you 9. But the 5 times 1.5 will give you only 7.5. Plus 1 on top of it, which is kaporet, is 8.5. Why is that a problem? Because we still know that the Aron plus the Kruvim on top has to be 20 tfachim. That doesn't change because he has to be 1/3 of the entire area open, and the entire area open is 60 tfachim, because that doesn't change. It's not 50 tfachim, because Amat HaBinyan, remember, the amot, the amma for the structure, everyone agrees is 6 tfachim. So 10 times 6, not 5, is 60. Divided by 3 is 20. So I know that the wings of the kruvim on top of the Aron has to reach 20 tfachim from the ground. So if you only have 8.5 until the top of kaporet, how tall were the keruvim? 11.5. So how tall should your sukkah be? 11.5. It got messed up. The whole 10 tfachim business is gone, right? One more time. Should we draw this? Yes? This is simple, guys. Here, if you have, should I do this with the Gemara? If you have, this is simple. Give me this extender over here. I don't want to use it. There we go. If you have, let's put a plug for KBT also with the logo here. There we go. Right? If you have this as the height that you need, because this is 1/3 of the entire Mishkan, right? Your Mishkan ends here, and we know it's 60 tfachim over here. That's not changing. And your Aron plus Keruvim has to end here. That's by 20 tfachim mark, right? That doesn't change. That stays the same. The only problem is, until now we said, well, the Aron, the actual Ark of Covenant, right? Aron HaEdut plus the Kaporet is 10, and the Kruvim are 10. So 10 plus 10 is 20. And therefore, the wings that are here are covering an area of 10 tfachim exactly beneath them, which is the minimum of Sukkah, Hazak Baruch. But that's only if it's 10 tfachim high. Then you know that this area between them is 10. But if I lower this a tefach and half, then that should tell me that the Sukkah has to be a minimum of 11.5 tefachim tall. And that's exactly what happens if you make the measurements of the Aron, which is 1.5 amot, by the amma, that's 5 tfachim. Because 5 tfachim is 1 amma. Amma and a half will be 7.5, right? 5 plus 2.5, 7.5. So it leaves you with a massive area over here beneath the wings of the kruvim, and it would dictate that the minimum height of a sukkah has to be 11.5. So that doesn't work with 10 tfachim, right? Of Rabbi Meir. So we have a problem according to Rabbi Yehuda. So it goes back to our original question. Mamash, we were by square one, back to square one. How in the world does Rabbi Yehuda know that the minimum height of a sukkah has to be 10 tefachim? Anybody with me? Oh, that's good. Okay. So, says the Gemara, how do you know, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you need 10 tefachim? Let's go through this. We explained it outside. Now let's read it inside. According to Rabbi Meir, all of the amot, both the structure of the Mishkan and Mikdash, and also the vessels, all of them are amot benoniot, which is 6 tefachim, right? Ela the Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar, Amashel binyan 6 tefachim, v'shel kelim 5 ma'ika lememar. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what do you say? Rabbi Yehuda holds that the structure of the building is 6 tefachim per amma, but the amot of the kelim, the vessels, is only 5 tefachim per amma. So therefore, Aron vekaporet kama havulehu. How much will the height of the Aron plus the kaporet will be? Temanya upalka will be only 8.5, not 10. Right? Because it will be 7.5 plus 1. Right? 7.5 is the Aron, 1 is the Kaporet, so that's all you got. Pashulehu chat sariu palga, so you're left with 11.5 tefachim to cover the subtotal height of 20 tefachim, which was the Aron plus Keruvim. So Ema sukkah ad dehavya chat sariu palga, so your minimum size of sukkah has to be 11.5. Ela Rabbi Yehuda. So what is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Hilchata gemirila. You know what? We have no source in the written Torah for Rabbi Yehuda at all. It's halacha leMoshe miSinai. It is halacha leMoshe miSinai, including many other things that we agree is halacha leMoshe miSinai. And not once the Gemara says this, the Gemara is going to go on a super duper educational trip of all the things that are halacha Moshe miSinai, and these Rabotai are super important because you need this across your journey through Shas. So you want to listen well once for a lifetime, right? So says Rabbi Yehuda, lo nora, nothing's going to burn. Many other things are halacha Moshe miSinai. This is going to be just another one of those who is halacha Moshe miSinai. So says the Gemara, the Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav. Rabbi Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rav, Shiurin. This is one of the most famous lines in the entire Masechet Sukkah. Shiurin, chatzitzin, umechitzin, halacha Moshe miSinai. The measurements, shiurim, chatzitzin, chatzitza, which we assume it means chatzitza in the mikveh, right? If you go to mikveh yourself, or you take a vessel into mikveh, it has to be without any barriers of the kli with the water. It has to be direct. When you have a vessel, you have to take the stickers off, right? You go to mikveh, you have to take the bandage off, right? You can't have any chatzitza between you and the water, so that's chatzitza. Umechitzin, and the laws of mechitzot, dividers and walls, all of that. Because again, sukkah needs a mechitza, needs a wall. The wall has to be 10 tefachim tall, and this is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, part of that. All of that is halacha leMoshe miSinai. All of these are said to Moshe Rabbeinu from Har Sinai as the perush, as the explanation of the Torah. Now, the Gemara gives you a sample for this, and we go through it. The Chtiv, again, we learned this in Masechet Brachot, Daf Mem Aleph together, when it came to priorities of Brachot, when it's speaking about different species that Eretz Yisrael has been praised with, those 7 items, right? Shivat Haminim, the pasuk about them says, Eres chita us'ora vegefen ut'ena verimon. Eres, Zet Shemen, Udvash. Those are the 7 items that Eretz Yisrael has been praised with. We have wheat and barley and grapes and figs and pomegranates and Zet Shemen, which is olives, and Dvash is dates. Those are 7 items. Ve'amar Rab Chanin taught us, Kol HaPasuk, aside from being a declaration of the 7 species and the priority thereof, of which one comes first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Aside from that, says the Gemara, the entire pasuk is teaching you leshiuri nemar. Different measurements of the Torah are hinted in this one pasuk, and this is mind-boggling to go through all of them, because we speak about kazayit and kabetza and kagerogeret and the shiur of tum'ah, right, being related to chitim, which is wheat, and barley. All of those things are learned from this one pasuk. This is going to be a fascinating learn out, which Be'ezrat Hashem we will explain and expand and unfold in the next shiur. Chazaku Baruch.